Please state your name for the record.
My name is Kyle Duncan. I'm from the Louisiana Department of Justice. I am the lead counsel in the Fifth Circuit in the case that Representative Hines was referring to, which is called Adar versus Smith. Representative Labruzzo, could you repeat your question so I can understand it?
Okay, basically, one parent adopts. It's a single parent, Louisiana. They take the child to New York, California, wherever they want to go. Then, once they get there, they file for the other person to adopt that child, so then you have two parents.
So in California, let's say, or in New York, then for purposes of that state's law, the child would have two adoptive parents.
Correct.
That's correct for purposes of New York or California law. Yes, New York and California are perfectly free to enact that public policy.
So Louisiana is really not prohibiting anybody from doing that, but they need to honor our state's laws. It says only one or a married couple, right?
That's absolutely right. I want to answer that further, but I also want to clarify what I'm doing here. I want to be able to give you and anyone who has questions about the effect of this pending legislation on the litigation, and I'm answering questions in that capacity. But I can. Do you want me to respond further to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the effect that you're describing is exactly what is posed in this litigation. New York or any other state is free to have whatever policies about adoption and married and unmarried couples. Louisiana's public policy, as you know, is in the Children's Code, and it's a very important public policy that says a single person may adopt or a married couple may adopt jointly. Unmarried persons may not jointly adopt. Single persons may adopt. There's a very important public policy behind that I don't need to remind you of. When another state enacts a different public policy, Louisiana can't do anything to interfere with that.
Correct.
But if, as in this litigation, if those parents who are adoptive parents for purposes of another state's law come to Louisiana and says, change your public records on the basis of New York or some other state's law that are based on different policy concerns, Louisiana has the prerogative not to do that.
Sure.
And that's where the full faith and credit issue comes in that Representative Hines referred to. There is a full faith and credit issue in this litigation, but the important thing to remember, and I encourage you to read the judge's order in the case if you haven't read it, which is available, I can make it available to you or you can get it online. There is a distinction between full faith and credit and Louisiana's enforcement mechanism. That's what the judge calls it, and he's right. It's an enforcement mechanism which is in the Vital Records Law. Louisiana may have all sorts of full faith and credit obligations to an out-of-state adoption. That's not an issue in the litigation. The only thing that's an issue is, does Louisiana have to change its public records to accommodate another state's different policy? There is a clear exception in full faith and credit law for those kind of enforcement measures. That's what's at issue in the litigation. So, if this bill passes, it will simply clarify what the law has always been in Louisiana and exactly what the state registrar has interpreted already to be, and it will simply clarify what the correct interpretation of Louisiana law is. Now, as you know, the judge in this particular case arrived at a different interpretation. I'm lead counsel in that case. I obviously strongly disagree with that. I will press my arguments in the Fifth Circuit, and I hope to win. I can make available to you all the briefing in the case that explains why, properly understood, the law as it is right now is exactly the same as this amendment. What's the difference, though? This amendment makes very clear that you have to read Louisiana Vital Records Law in conformity with the Louisiana Children's Code, Louisiana Civil Code. That's a basic principle of interpretation that's in the Louisiana Civil Code that I know you all are aware of. You have to read laws to be consistent with each other. Unfortunately, the judge in this case did not do that, and we will see if the Fifth Circuit will agree with us. Passage of this legislation, though, will make that very, very clear and will protect Louisiana's public policy on adoptions.
I just want to make
That's the effect.
Okay, I just want to make something clear to myself and anyone else. Okay, and let's talk about this case specifically.
Okay.
if one parent, one individual in the case, would have come down and adopted this child, there would have been no prohibition, correct?
Not under the Louisiana Children's Code.
Okay.
A single person can adopt under the Louisiana Children's Code.
Hypothetically, this adoptive parent goes back to New York. The other individual files to adopt in New York.
Yeah, I think they call that a second parent adoption.
Okay? Then they would basically have exactly what they want, where they have two parents, where if something happens and sick, need a parent's signature on something at school, either one would be able to do that.
That's exactly the point, Representative.
Okay, let me finish. Let me finish my point. Okay, I just want to
go ahead.
finish painting this picture here.
Yeah.
So basically, this lawsuit is seemingly more political and trying to make Louisiana change its law more than it is to try to get two parents two individuals to be parents of a particular child.
I can't comment on whether it's political or not. No. I don't know what. I'm sure the motivation.
Right answer, but
I'm sure that the motivations of the plaintiffs.
Let's roll this up.
Okay, I can't comment on that. What the point is that New York or California, where the plaintiffs currently live, those states are free to make sure that none of the bad consequences that Representative Hines just talked about ever happen.
Thank you.
That never needs to happen because California and New York could take care of it, and frankly, Louisiana could take care of it too if those kind of situations ever arose. What we're talking about here is something totally different. It's talking about whether Louisiana needs to change its public records to reflect the policies of another state that are contrary.
Yeah.
And the full faith and credit clause, in my opinion, this is my argument that I've made all along in the litigation that I'll press in the Fifth Circuit, is that it does not.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Kay, at the proper time, I would like to move favorable. I'd like
Thank you. We'll hold that.
Thank
you. Representative Hines, is this for the Attorney General's office? Representative Hines.
Thank you. You clarified a lot of the points or my concerns. My question is, so when is a child a legal resident of Louisiana? In other words, the case that Representative Labruzzo has brought up, the hypothetical, when does a child lose their custody rights? When do they actually end up becoming a resident of New York, per se? Because couldn't you actually I want to make sure that if one person in New York adopted this child out of Louisiana and took him to New York, and then under New York law, as you say, it's a second parent adoption.
Right.
There's also joint adoption. I've seen a whole step parent adoption. Other states have different laws. If any of those things happen, would you not be able to sue for that child, being that child was formerly a Louisiana resident? In other words, would the law then supersede that, and would that child effectively become a resident of New York after the adoption by the one parent?
Yeah, I understand the question. Now, just to be clear, you're asking me now about sort of interstate family law and this sort of thing, not my area of expertise. My understanding, though, would be, yeah, obviously at some point you take a child, you move with your child to another state, that child becomes a resident of another state.
And my follow-up question is, though, but what happens when those two New York couple, they actually decide, I want to move back to Louisiana?
That's a real difficult case. We don't have that case in front of us, and that's the important thing about this bill. All this bill does is talk about vital records laws. It does not talk about what Louisiana has to do if somebody took a child that was Louisiana born, adopt a child in another state, and then come to Louisiana and do something. That's a very difficult case, and that would be a real difficult case.
And I support Louisiana having our own policy. I totally agree with what you're trying to do here because, again, it's about the full faith and credit, but would we honor another state's full faith and credit? In other words, say a New York couple from New York, born and raised in New York, has a child there, they have obviously a second parent adoption or joint adoption law. They then move to Louisiana. So legally from New York, they are able to have two parents on their birth certificate. They come to Louisiana. How would the law rule once that couple moves to Louisiana?
It depends on the case, and I have no idea. But let me tell you this.
Would this affect that with what we're passing today?
I don't see how it would. But let me say this. This might help you understand it. In New York, this is a cutting-edge issue about whether unmarried people, whether they're same-sex or a same-sex couple or different-sex couple, can adopt at all. The only reason that they can adopt in New York, and this is my understanding of New York law, is because a New York appellate court decreed it. So this is even a cutting-edge and controversial issue in New York itself. And all Louisiana is saying is, well, y'all can deal with your controversial public policy issues in New York. Let us deal with our public policy issues down here. So it's really a federalism issue, much more than it's a family law. It's certainly not a same-sex, different-sex issue. Those issues might come up in the future, and those will be very difficult cases that I'm sure I'll have to handle. But this is not that case. This